Hello everyone, how's it going? And welcome to the biggest Wild Rift update ever. It has been 2 years since Riot decided to change the map of Summoner's Rift on Wild Rift, but that wait is finally over. In patch 5.2, we will be getting the brand new Hex Rift. I was lucky enough to be invited by Riot to a dev talk last week, which got me a little bit of an insight into patch 5.2. We have Hexgates coming, we have a new Herald, we have a new Baron, we have a new interaction during the laning phase. This patch is looking to be one of the biggest and best patches we have ever gotten to Wild Rift. But not only that, we also got a chance to have a chat with some of the Wild Rift developers as well. So I also have a few answers to a few of your questions that you might be asking, maybe in terms of the patch or maybe even other topics as well, which I'll talk about right at the end of the video. I will leave timestamps in the description, but there is a lot of details that I'm going to be going through and talking about, and I also have video content on all the new changes coming to patch 5.2. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. The first new feature we're going to be taking a look at is the brand new Hextech loot kits. These are little loot kits which spawn one in every single lane, one in the top lane, one in the mid lane, and one in the bot lane. And they start spawning at 1 minute in the game and they stop spawning at 8 minutes in the game. As you can see, all you do is walk up to these loot chests, you stay on in the area for just a short duration, and you pick up a new active item. Now these items can be pretty simple, as you can see here, making your champion bigger, or you can also just make your champion smaller, but some of them have a lot bigger impact than others. As you can see, there's a little turret that we saw at the start which deals a little bit of damage. This next one that you're about to see is probably the strongest one that you're probably going to be able to get. As you can see, like a long range cannon which does a stupid amount of damage to the tower. I'm not too sure if that's balanced. That's probably going to get changed before it goes to live. But there are 7 different unique Hextech loot kits that you can get during the game. And the big thing for Riot, they told us kind of the current observations in terms of the game and what their design goals are of these new loot kits and also all the other new features. So their current observation at the moment of the game, you're going to see me looking at this screen because this is where kind of my notes are. The influence level of the laning phase is low and the experience is a little bit repetitive. So there's a low sense of achievement with establishing a lane advantage at the moment during the game. So their design goals with this loot kit is that they wanted to empower snowball effects and heroism in the laning phase, increasing the impact of the lane players on the overall game situation. And they also wanted to increase the variability in laning phase, including new movement during the game. Now, the big thing that they said was that they understand that jungle is by far one of the most popular and also one of the strongest roles in the game. So they've introduced these Hextech loot kits to give a little bit more power during the laning phase, and also just to make a laning phase more fun as well. Because every single time you go into a game, you're walking into a lane, you're farming minions, and you're just doing the same thing over and over again. And this is kind of where they wanted to make something new. They also said to us that they want to try and escape away from this whole League of Legends kind of concept of Summoner's Rift and do brand new concepts that has never been tested before, which I think is absolutely great for this game. New concepts, new designs, new features will bring, in my opinion, a lot more people to this game. So this is the Hextech loot system. Let me know what you think. On to the next feature. The next new feature is the addition of Hexgates to Wild Rift. Now, you're probably wondering, does this mean that Hextech Dragon is coming to Wild Rift? No, this is a permanent feature that will be happening in every single game. Now, as you can see on the map, these work a little bit differently to what they do in PC League of Legends. In PC League of Legends, there was ways to get from one side of the jungle, like your side of the jungle, to the enemy's jungle and vice versa. But these are a little bit different. These are ways in which teams can rotate from one side of the map all the way to the other. So if you want to get here from the blue buff all the way back down to the bot lane, then you can do just that. So someone like Jinx, for example, can rotate to the Rift Herald to start things off and easily go back down to the bot lane thanks to the Hexgates. Now, the big thing in terms of the current observation, which Riot told us during this dev update, is they said that they they kind of understand that there's not really an advantage that can happen in the game at the moment without the mobility and the assistance of teammates. They understand that top lane at the moment feels like you're basically on an island. There's not really that much focus in terms of the top lane. So this is a way in terms of top lane being able to make a bigger impact in the game, but also again for allowing supports to roam a lot quicker as well, and to allow them to get from one side of the map to the other. So the design goals of this Hex Rift were to introduce gates to encourage quick support in the jungle, and also just a small scale in terms of team fights as well, and activate the mobility and roaming capabilities of the top lane and support for assistance, as I already mentioned. Now there are some more details about this Hex Rift that they actually told us about, or these Hexgates I should say, that they told us about. Now you can use the enemy's Hexgates. So if you invade in the enemy jungle, and if you want to use their Hexgates to try and escape, or to try and get from one side of the map to the other side in the enemy's jungle, you can totally do that. Which I think is pretty big, and also a way in which the enemy, in which your jungler can invade in the enemy jungle and try and escape and try and surprise enemies from across the map. Another big thing is that everyone will have vision of these Hex Gates when used. You've probably seen it a little bit on these clips. It's going to be highlighted here now. As you can see the enemy Jinx going from one Hex Gate to the other. So every single time that you use a Hex Gate, you do have to be careful, because the enemy team is going to be getting vision of you the entire time. So if you invade into the enemy jungle, if you use the enemy's Hex Gates, hey, you might have that little bit of a surprise factor that everyone on the enemy team might be there waiting for you. So you do need to be a little bit careful. The Hex Gates spawn at 4 minutes and 30 seconds in the game, which will spawn just before the major objectives spawn. So like the Rift Herald and also the Dragon. I think the big thing which Hex Gates are going to be used for is for the supports and the bot lanes to roam up to the Rift Herald, or even vice versa. You know, the top lanes roaming down to the support. As I mentioned, that's kind of their goal with this, which I think is exactly what's going to happen. However, when you do use these Hex Gates, there is going to be a 45-second cooldown. So if you use the Hex Gates to get from one side of the map to the other, you won't be able to use that Hex Gate again to get to the other side of the map for another 45 seconds. So you either have to wait for the Hex Gate to get back to your lane, or you just have to go back to base and walk to the lane. There are many different ways in which I think you can use these Hex Gates, and I think these are a great addition to the game to have a little bit more uniqueness and also a new experience on Summoner's Rift as well. I think these are going to be, you're going to be able to get some really cool plays, some really cool roaming potentials. I think junglers especially are going to be able to do this, use this extremely well to just farm through the jungle quicker. But also, again, as I mentioned, you know, the top laners and the supports roaming a lot more with these Hex Gates are going to be extremely impactful when it comes to the new Hex Rifts. Now, these were two kind of standard features, I guess you can say, with the loot boxes and also these Hex Rifts, or these Hex Gates, I should say. But now we're going to get into the big major objectives, Rift Herald and the new Baron Nashor. Welcome to the new Rift Heralds. Yes, there are two different Rift Herald variants in patch 5.2 with Hex Rift. You're going to be seeing the new Hextech Mimic, which is the first version of Rift Herald, and then you have the second version, which is called Hextech Gorilla Turret. Now these are completely random. You do not know which version you are getting of the Rift Herald until that 5-minute point of the game comes along. So you don't know what version you're going to be getting. And then these two are completely different versions of Rift Herald. As you saw at the start, the Hextech Mimic kind of basically spawns a few bombs at the start of your turrets, and this will just help you push the laning phase. These will also go to the jungler as well. And then you have this new one, which is the Hextech Gorilla Turret. Now, the Gorilla Turret is very similar to the way Rift Herald works at the moment. However, there are still a few changes. The Gorilla Turret now can attack minions, and there's no charging mechanic either now. So you have to actually auto-attack with the Gorilla Turret, or I should say the Gorilla Turret auto-attacks the towers, and there's no way in which the turrets can charge and try and take a tower super quickly. Now, there's actually no real way in kind of determining when the gorilla turret is going to die. It does have the HP, but the HP, as you can see, is quite high. What you'll see is there is an energy bar underneath the health bar, as you'll see right now, of the Hextech gorilla turret. This little energy bar underneath the health bar basically tells you the duration that you have left of the gorilla turret. As you can see, it's going to expire here, and when it expires, it's going to go down. So it works completely differently to the Rift Herald, because the Rift Herald was more to do with you're trying to get one charge or maybe two charges, and when the health goes down, it's dead. This is a bit different. If you can protect that gorilla turret, you could potentially get one, maybe even two towers with the extra power that you can get. Now, with the addition of these new Rift Heralds, the biggest, again, observations that Riot was talking to us about, they were saying that the Rift Herald release strategy at the moment is not very diverse. They understand that when Rift Herald is taken at the moment in the game, they said 90% of the time, teams actually go to the mid lane. They use a Rift Herald on the mid lane to open up the map to try and take that mid lane tower. So they kind of don't want this same repetitive pace in terms of the game. And also they understand that the bot lane and the top lane kind of don't really get the same benefit from Rift Herald. So their design goals were to introduce this new random Rift Herald effect, which basically increases the game variability and also the lane preferences as well. And the new Rift Herald Mimic, or the Hextech Mimic, will allow all teammates to benefit from the new Rift Herald. As you can see here, the jungler has bombs, and the bombs will spawn behind each turret. So every single laner can walk up to these bombs, can take the bombs, and when they stand close to the turret, they're going to be able to do a lot of damage to these turrets. Again, you can still get the gorilla turret version as well, which is very similar to the Rift Herald, again to kind of lower the learning curve of the new gameplay and also maintain the original experience. But they did say that they are able to kind of collect feedback about the gorilla turret as well. They're kind of ready to either nerf or buff the gorilla turret because they understand that there could be some variances for the gorilla turret as well. So they are definitely prepared for that one. A few other bits of information as well. They're not really too much. Again, I've kind of already explained it all in terms of the gorilla turret itself. You know, doesn't charge anymore. It can hit the minions, and also it has a limited life and an energy bar, which is kind of the duration that it is on. So this is a new Rift Herald. It's pretty cool, to be honest with you. I love this new Mimic version. I think being able to get an advantage for all your laners are going to be really, really big. Now, as I mentioned, there is no new dragons in this game, and as they mentioned to us, there's going to be no real changes to the dragons as well. And I feel like what this does is this gives even more power to that side of the map. The Rift Herald was already the better objective to take. Now it's going to be even more important to take the Rift Herald, because not only are you going to get a power potentially with the Hextech Mimic, but also every single laner is going to be able to get it as well. So I think it's huge to buff up all of your lanes and give that extra bit of power, which I think is pretty big. So yeah, the new Rift Herald, absolutely incredible. I love it. But now onto the main event of this video, the new Hextech Baron. Boy, oh boy, are you not ready for this? The new Hextech Baron Nashor. It looks very different. It has new effects. It has new attacks. And now you get a brand new buff with this Hextech Baron Nashor. Look at this. This is the T-HEX mecha. When the team takes the Baron Nashor, this T-HEX mecha will spawn into the base. And when a player goes back to the base, they can take this T-HEX mecha and they can control the T-HEX mecha. You still have the empowered recalls, but the big thing, look at this. Xin Zhao walks over to it and look, jumps in, and you become the T-HEX mecha. You could ride the T-HEX mecha. It has its own auto attacks. It has its own abilities. It can buff the wave. It has its own HP and its own power. This is by far the coolest thing I think they have ever added to Wild Rift. They're going to show all the abilities as well. Unfortunately, there's no audio on this clip, even though the other clips did have audio. But the ultimate, I think, is the coolest part with that huge, massive laser. And as you can see, the ally can also jump out as well. They said the allies can jump out at around 40% health with the T-HEX mecha. Now, anyone in the game can go back to the base and jump into this T-HEX mecha, which I feel like there is going to be a lot of people that are going to be going back to the base and trying to get into it. There is going to be a big scramble to try and get on this T-HEX mecha when it first comes into the game. Obviously, the main sort of champion that you want to go for the T-HEX mecha is either the tank or the jungler. You know, you kind of don't really want the AD carry really taking the T-HEX mecha because that's kind of a damage source kind of gone. As you can see, there is still the empowered recalls as well. Again, as I mentioned, going to be talking about the current observations. They said at the moment that they feel like the team goals are scattered after making a large effort to try and kill Baron Nashor, making it harder to snowball the advantage. So they don't feel like players really know how to make full advantage of Baron Nashor. Now, this is probably the case in terms of lower elos, but high elos, you'll probably see multiple lanes being pushed, especially pro play as well. The way the Baron Nashor was really good was empowering the minions and being able to push multiple lanes and get power to every single lane. Whereas now with this T-HEX meta, we're going to be getting a lot of ARAMs. There's going to be a lot of players just running towards mid, trying to defend this T-HEX mecha and trying to give a lot of power towards this T-HEX mecha. And also they understand that players have a low influence in the late game and they can't really contribute to the team as well. This is players that just get behind during the early game. You know, they don't really have that lane advantage. They're behind in gold. And when they get behind in gold, they're kind of useless. Well, now with this T-HEX mecha, they could be like, hey, I'm not very useless anymore. I can take control of the T-HEX mecha and I can be this new unit, this new kind of champion, I feel like, coming into the game. So the design goals for this T-HEX mecha was after saying Baron Nashor, they wanted a new mechanic where you can actually have a bit more power with the T-HEX mecha, again with new skills, and the whole team has a unified objective now. So when this T-HEX mecha spawns from the Baron Nashor, you'll be able to all know on the ally team or on your team that everyone needs to go to where the T-HEX mecha is. There's no real splitting around. There's no real different communication happening with the team. Everyone knows that it needs to go into the same lane as the T-HEX mecha. Probably in my solo queue games, there probably is still going to be a way in which this T-HEX mecha is going to be away from the entirety of the team. But hey, there's that. And as I mentioned, anyone can take the T-HEX, not just the Baron Nashor taker, which I think is pretty big. The Baron Nashor also has different ways to attacks. Now, in terms of the minion wave being buffed, you saw there that there were actually some minions that were buffed. Right, kind of gave us a little bit of confirmation for that. So when you first jump into the T-HEX, the first minion wave that surrounds the T-HEX will be buffed with kind of the same Baron Nashor effect. After the first wave being buffed, it's only going to be the cannon minions. As you can see, it's only going to be some of the minions that are going to be buffed, not the first one that comes with the first wave of the T-HEX. And also the T-HEX is only available for a certain time as well. It's not a permanent thing that comes into the game that will just stay on you forever until it dies. There is a duration that you have with the T-HEX. You know, as you can see here, when Xin Zhao jumps into the T-HEX, there is going to be a bit of an energy bar, kind of similar to the gorilla turret that you just saw. There's the red energy bar at the bottom, which kind of gives you that bit of power. And the thing with the T-HEX is that the T-HEX will get the same stats. It doesn't matter which ally champion or enemy champion jumps into the T-HEX. So say, for example, the AD carry jumps into the T-HEX and has a bunch of attack damage. That doesn't buff the attacks of the T-HEX. You know, a tank jumping into the T-HEX that has a bunch of HP, that doesn't affect the HP of the T-HEX. It doesn't matter what champion jumps into this T-HEX, the T-HEX is still going to have the same stats throughout the entire game. Like I said, this is probably the biggest and best change I think they have ever done to Wild Rift. I do think there are some negatives in which there's basically just going to be a 5v5 ARAM when Baron Nashor gets taken now, and there's kind of not really any skill involved in terms of trying to split push and trying to push other lanes. But just in terms of uniqueness, in terms of something fresh, something new, It's brilliant. I absolutely love this change coming to Wild Rift as well. But this isn't the only new thing coming to Wild Rift. We also have new champions as well. And I'm going to be revealing the first new champion that's going to be released in patch 5.2. The first new champion coming to Wild Rift in patch 5.2 is none other than Lissandra. Lissandra is this really cool high mechanical mage that can be played in the mid lane. There is also ways in which this champion can also be played in support as well. And you're getting a little bit of a showcase here on the abilities of Lissandra. So her passive, basically when you kill an enemy champion, they kind of get a little snow effect, I guess you could say, or an ice effect, which follows enemy champions, slowing them and dealing damage. The first ability, she throws out an icicle which slow enemies and deals damage. The second ability is a big massive AoE stun. The third ability is kind of the cool, as you can see here, this cool mechanic which allows her to throw out her kind of claw, I guess, and allow her to travel to a different location. And her ultimate can be used on herself or on an enemy champion. And what it does is it basically freezes them or freezes herself as well, as you can see, to be able to deal a lot of damage, but also help with her survivability in terms of healing as well. This is going to be an absolutely crazy and fun champion that is coming to Wild Rift. Lissandra is one of the coolest mid lane mages, I think, in the game, and also, again, can be played support as well. Now, one of the things they were mentioning as well is kind of they like the way in which Wild Rift players are very unique with the game. There was a funny question from one of the creators that was like, is Lissandra jungle a thing? And they didn't actually say no. They never actually counted out and said, hey, you can't play Lissandra in the jungle. But they said that they are ready and waiting. And I think that Wild Rift have been very good with this recently, that they've been able to be very reactive in terms of hotfix buffs or hotfix nerfs if something is very broken. But they're excited to see what Lissandra is going to bring to the game, and also what new ways in which the players can kind of play Lissandra, which I think is really, really big. Again, getting a new mage into the game, having a little bit of uniqueness, having a little bit of playmaking potential and cool effects as well, I think is absolutely amazing. But basically, Lissandra is, they said, 99% similar to PC League. They said the only thing that might change is maybe a few of the base stats. That's about it. Basically, exact same replica as what it is on PC League of Legends. So let me know what you think of Lissandra. Let me know if you're excited for this champion coming to Wild Rift. That's everything in terms of the Hex Rift. I do have a few more things in which was happening during the Q&A that I did want to share with you as well. So let's talk about a few things that Riot are aware of and a few changes that are also going to be happening in patch 5.2 that's not related to this new Hex Rift. Now, as I mentioned, we had a little bit of a Q&A session as well with the developers, so we were able to ask a lot of questions. My main question, and what I'm going to be talking about straight away, obviously I'm the creator of Wild Rift Fire. I do all the bunch of the builds. So my big question was, are shadow items staying in the game? And their quick answer was no. And they didn't say that it was because of the balancing of the shadow items. They actually said that they found huge success with the shadow items, and it was a cool way to experiment with items and how they can change the effects of items. But they wanted to kind of explore more things in the game. Again, it seems like at the moment Wild Rift is going for this theme by theme patch, where every single patch is basically completely different, adding this new theme. With patch 5.1, it was to do with the shadow isles, and it was to do with the shadow items, the light and the dark items, and now we're getting this brand new Hex Rift. So all the shadow items are basically going to be going back to its normal standard items. We don't know it in terms of what's going to be happening with the stats of the items at all. We're not too sure if it's going to go back to the original stats of the items, or there might be a few changes. We'll have to obviously wait for the patch notes for that. Another thing is that they said that they are monitoring the situation and the inflation of blue motes. If you don't know what blue motes are, they're basically currency in the game, which is a way of which to buy champions. Now, if you're like me and if you played the game for 3+ years, then you're going to be sitting on 200, 300, maybe even 500,000 plus blue motes, which are basically sitting there collecting dust. So they understand that the blue mote situation and the inflation is pretty big, and they're kind of working to see what they can plan with these blue motes. They're also considering a kind of a rework in terms of the reward system to make it more meaningful every single time someone opens the game. I have been recognizing that there have been a lot more events in the game very recently, which I think is great. I think giving players more incentive in terms of playing the game and also logging into the game daily, again, is pretty good for Riot in terms of numbers for Wild Rift and in terms of player base, but also it's pretty good for the players as well. You know, free rewards, free ways in which to gather, whether it's like orange essence, whether it's like any other Poro coins or any other currency like that. So it'll be interesting to see what they're kind of planning in terms of this reward system. They also said they are planning to explore options for players to interact during loading screens. They didn't actually talk to us too much about this. They just said that, again, they're kind of exploring options. They're seeing ways in which, you know, players can kind of interact with the loading screen when they're waiting for a game. They said that on average, a player in Brazil has to wait 1 minute in the loading time, which they want to kind of make it so you're not standing there AFK and you're not just waiting for the game to start, which again is pretty cool. They said there's no real plan at the moment in terms of the global beta server just yet. As you know, I've had access to the test server because I'm one of the partnered content creators. I'm not too sure if I'm going to be getting a test server for patch 5.2. I'll have to wait and see closer to the time. Fingers crossed, I hopefully do, because I definitely want to do a guide on Lissandra and also go into a little bit more depth in terms of these new features that are coming to the game. But again, I have to kind of wait and see. Again, kind of this new kind of way in which Riot are approaching Wild Rift. They said that they want to come up with new item designs that differ from PC League of Legends. One of the questions was actually to do with Kraken Slayer. Is Kraken Slayer going to be returning as an item from PC League of Legends? They said they're not rolling it out as an option, but they also want to kind of explore more unique and more cool items that are different to PC League of Legends, which, as I mentioned before, I think what Riot are doing now with Wild Rift is what we have needed for such a long time. At the moment, a lot of players are like, what's the point of me playing Wild Rift? It's basically the exact same as League of Legends. I can just turn on my PC and I can play League of Legends. With this new Hex Rift, with this new feature that's come into the game, and hopefully they'll add more items as well, which I think is pretty cool. I think this is a great way in which this can bring more players to Wild Rift, make the game more popular, and make the game more interesting to play as well, because now players are going to be getting a new experience on Wild Rift compared to League of Legends. They were saying that Riot have tested different game modes and different ideas in terms of game modes as well. They've actually been testing stuff for the past year or so. So there's going to be more game modes coming out as well. And they said, as I mentioned before, that they will monitor the game duration with this new T-HEX. They're willing to monitor the game duration, the power of the T-HEX, and they're prepared to change stats if it is too strong. That is absolutely everything. This is probably, as I said, the biggest and best patch I think I've ever seen for Wild Rift. I've been playing this game since launch. I've been there since day one for Wild Rift. I've been there through content creation, through casting, through esports, through helping players, through the website. And this is probably one of the most excited times I think it is to be a Wild Rift player. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Thank you all so much for watching the insights. I will be doing more videos as well in terms of more insights to this, maybe breaking down a little bit more in terms of the videos. And again, hopefully I'll get access to the test server so I can do more content, more videos, and everything of the new patch. If you enjoyed this rundown, make sure you give the channel a subscribe. As I mentioned, I'll be doing a lot of content on here. Make sure you give the video a like and comment down below what is your favorite part of the Hex Rift that you're excited about. And you know what mine's going to be? The T-HEX, baby. I'm so excited to get my hands on the T-HEX, to jump into the T-HEX and do so much work. I'm super excited. I hope you all are as well. It's a good time to be a Wild Rift fan and a Wild Rift player. So until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next Wild Rift video. Peace.